Hey, what's up? It's Bon, and today we're going to talk about me. Or, I'm sorry, that's dumb. We're going to do a content update. I've been trying to do this about once every 6 months or so, almost since I started making content. I used to post it on my Medium blog. If you remember those old Words with Bon interviews I would do. And now I do them on video. So let's talk about what has happened this year, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with what I want to do for 2024. So, first, we're going to talk about YouTube. I set a goal for 2023 to get partnered fully on YouTube by the end of the year. Where I was at during the last update in June, or June or July, I had just crossed 2,000 subscribers, and I had made a lot of gains in viewership and such. What you needed, or what you need to get full partnered, is 4,000 hours of view time in the last 365 days. It's a running total, as well as I think it's 1,000 subscribers. I've had that for a while, but the viewership, I've been so close. There's been multiple times I got up into the 3,000s of viewer hours, and it just always came back down. As of this summer, though, they introduced a lower tier of the partner program. And actually, I was immediately, you only needed 3,000 viewer hours, which I've been at for a while. And so I qualified for that, but then they didn't implement that until like October. Then moving forward just a month to N7 Day, basically that pushed me over the edge to be a full partner. So my goal for 2023 was reached in November, and I'm really happy. It's really great. I don't think it's really changed my content much here on YouTube. You will notice that I have like membership options, merch and stuff like that. I've been doing member only videos, but the way I do it is as soon as I post them to YouTube, they're member only. And then when they were going to release publicly anyways, they go live and everyone can see them after that. So if you are considering being a member and you see that there's only a couple of videos that are member only, you probably won't see many of those because I make them all public eventually. So you do get early access, and that's something I want to keep doing. The general viewership on YouTube has been great this year. One great example of how big this year has been for me is I believe I've had my YouTube active since 2016 or 17. And all of those years up until the end of 2022, I had gotten about 200,000 views. And that really came from a handful of videos from like around the Division 2's launch and stuff like that got a bunch of views. But it was that many views in multiple years. If you don't know the YouTube game much, getting 200,000 views in a year for some people would be a huge failure. So for me to get that over 4, 5, 6 years, it wasn't very many views, right? Especially for someone who's trying. Now, I was never really trying super hard with YouTube for years, but this year I kind of battened down the hatches and went for it. And just in 2023, I believe I have over 115,000 views just this year. That's obviously why I got pushed over the edge on the partnership program. I'm finally in there, but I do want to make it very clear that I'm being humble here. For real YouTubers, the number of views I got this year is like an expected number for viewership. 100,000 on a video is normal for a lot of people, and for some it would even be disappointing. Now, in the circles I run in the Mass Effect community, the Division, stuff like that, a few thousand views a video is pretty good. If you're getting over 10,000, is extremely good. My big hit videos this year were ones that had 1 to 5,000 views, and my typical viewership was between 250 to 500, with a few outliers here and there. So it's been a great year. I'm not trying to do this full time. It's all about having a goal and something to work on. And in that way, this has been great. Now, as for subscriber growth, it's not been crazy. I hit 2,000 over the summer. I'm sitting around 2,200 now. My goal is to get to 5,000. I think maybe that will be my goal for 2024. I just don't know how I'll get there because, and we'll talk about the content I'll cover next year, but I've thought about doing like one video a month where I hit some current issue that isn't part of my normal content, but some issue in gaming. Like if I did it right now, it would be about like the video game awards, or I would do it about the day before or whatever. To maybe spend a little more time on these like more general gaming topics that are getting more eyes on them, rather than the pretty niche the Division 3 wish list videos, or what I hope the next Mass Effect has. I do recognize that those are a pretty small niche, and getting big subscriber growth is probably going to require doing some more generic reporting, but there are still more generic stories I do want to cover. So you may see more of that next year, in a kind of attempted goal of trying to expand the viewer base just a little bit. And that's it for YouTube. Great year for that. I hit the big main goal I had for this year, and thanks to all of you who watch my videos and helped me get there. Now, talking about the podcast or the podcast, I started up the Mass Effect Hypecast this year as kind of an outlet for my desire to talk about that next game. I was noticing that within my other podcast, my weekly gaming news podcast, The Bonfire, I was basically finding reasons to speculate on the next Mass Effect almost every week, and I started to recognize like, for people who really are just here for the news and for the updates and my takes on it, this is probably getting kind of annoying, like, because I was legitimately just finding ways to talk about it, even if there wasn't real news. Now, when there were leaks or speculations or things like that about the next game, that's obviously newsworthy. I'll still talk about that in the main show. But this Mass Effect Hypecast is something I'm excited about. It's probably only going to be about once a month, as I've said before. I'm going to try to have guests on it more often than I do my other show, which is basically never. And actually, 2 of the episodes currently for the Hypecast are with N7 Legend, where we did such a long podcast. I split it into 2 parts, and that's available now. You can go check that out. Mostly talking about the most recent N7 day and some kind of exclusive information he had from a source that used to be at BioWare. Going to the main podcast, though, we have the Bonfire, which at the beginning of the year I would have called the EchoCast. Doing that branding change was hard for me. The EchoCast is what I've called the podcast for the first many years it existed. I'm going to record episode 265 the day after I'm doing this video. So it was the EchoCast for most of that time. But I felt like that was a little too, it didn't message what I wanted it to. It wasn't, it was about the Division still. And I haven't made that podcast just about the Division for, I think multiple years now. And because it just can't sustain it, at least not for my interest. So that change was great. The name, The Bonfire, was actually suggested by Jay Lorg, who's actually a massive Ubisoft Massive employee that worked on the most recent Avatar game. And it's perfect. I love it, and I really appreciate him a lot for coming up with that. It just fits perfectly. And, having that vibe of just me and everyone who's listening sitting around the campfire, just talking about games and what's going on with it. This solo format where it's just me talking in a podcast form is weird. It's fairly uncommon, and it's not very popular. So that podcast really having any listeners is a big deal for me. And the fact that it has held pretty steady. It's not at numbers that if I was a brand new podcaster and I was getting the numbers I get on the podcast, I don't know how much I would keep with it. I would say between YouTube and all the podcast platforms, I'm probably looking at 200 to 300 listeners per episode. It is a new episode every week. If you had 300 people in a room with you, that would seem like a lot of people, because it is. And I do appreciate every person who listens. My goal for the podcast, for the Bonfire, would be a listenership of around 1,000 an episode. That's what I would really like to get to. I just don't know how. So a lot of my 2024 is going to be looking into that. I'll get more into my goals for next year here in a moment, but I'm really proud of the podcast. It's my favorite thing to do. It's a great way to get some steam out and talk about things in the gaming industry that at least a few people seem to appreciate hearing from me. So if you listen, thank you very much. It's been a good year for the podcast. So streaming. I did make it part of my goal earlier this year that if I got partnered on YouTube and started making even just a little bit of revenue on YouTube, I would use that to justify paying for Streamlabs. I believe it's Ultra or Prime or something that allows me to multi-stream. So for the last few months, whenever I do stream, which isn't as often as I would prefer, you'll notice it's been on YouTube and on Twitch. I just don't think I'll really focus as much on streaming as I could. I think of it as bonus content, basically a chance for people who listen to the podcast or are in my Discord, things like that. I think it's a nice way for us to have a couple hours, maybe once or twice a week to interact, live and do all of that. My problem is that I'm not really willing to play the games I need to play to get bigger on Twitch or on YouTube streaming. And I just can't stream consistently enough or long enough for it to matter. In the rare occasions recently even where I've streamed for more than 3 or 4 hours, you see those numbers are just so much better because those platforms reward being there for a long time, as well as consistency, as well as playing the quote unquote right content. I mostly am going to want to play Mass Effect, The Division, whatever game I'm hype on in that moment. I'm not really willing to jump into Fortnite or Warzone and play these games that would almost certainly bring me more viewership, but that I wouldn't be happy about. And the viewership it would bring wouldn't be happy that I jump on for 2 or 3 hours at a stream per stream, maybe once or 3 times a week, or maybe not at all because I get busy or sick or whatever. So think of, if you're someone who's paying attention and who does like my content and wants to be a part of it, think of the streams as bonus content. I'm always happy to take like your Twitch subscriptions and bits and stuff like that, especially if you have a free Prime sub every month. That's a great way to support me because it doesn't cost you anything. It gives me a couple bucks per, so I really do appreciate that. I do try to stream enough that it feels like if you are a Twitch sub, especially, it feels like you're getting your money's worth. I just make no promises. The YouTube membership thing is a little different because you get some like kind of tacit rewards from that, even if I'm not streaming technically with the membership videos and stuff like that. But what I would say just in general about all of my content is just to remember I'm doing this as a serious hobby that I look at as like kind of a part-time job, but that it's not my number one, and I will do my best, but I cannot promise I will always be doing things like streaming. But I still really love streaming. Whenever I'm able to get on, I really, really like it. I plan on continuing to do it as often as I can. And I thank you if you've taken your time to come and hang out and chat. So I want to hit on social media just a bit. First, I'll talk about Twitter. Yes, I'm one of those annoying people who's going to keep calling it that because I can't change it. I just hate the other name so much. I admit, and I think most people have probably noticed, I tested out subscribing to the Twitter Blue or whatever it's called now. My intention was to try it out for a couple months and see if it significantly increased the interaction with the content I posted, partially the tweets and stuff I had, but mostly seeing if it helped with getting clicks onto my videos and podcasts and things like that. Long story short, it didn't. It seems like it's pretty well accepted at this point that if you aren't subscribed, your tweets and your replies and stuff like that to other tweets do get kind of pushed down. Maybe not completely filtered out, but certainly not pushed as much as people who are paying. And because I definitely noticed a huge jump in interactions with my tweets, or like views on my tweets, which is the worst metric for measuring that stuff. But whatever. But I didn't notice any substantial change in people that were clicking on my videos, sharing my videos, same with the podcast and stuff like that. So I have canceled that subscription. I'm not going to keep paying, especially not that doofus and that awful service, as Twitter continues to just get worse, in my opinion. And as I see people who I enjoy interacting with disappearing from it. So, I experimented with it. I'm going to keep using Twitter, at least, somewhat. I'm still pretty active on there, but I'm definitely, not going to be crushed at this point if it goes away, because it's not even what it used to be anymore. Now, there is Blue Sky, which I've dabbled in. I think Blue Sky is kind of a black hole. Blue Sky is the one that everyone seems like they want, but no one actually uses. I have one. I follow a decent number of people. I have a few followers, and it's just a black hole, in my opinion. It's just a dead zone. And I post my new videos, my podcasts, random tweets here and there. I'll post on all of my available social media places, but Blue Sky is definitely the one where I feel the least desire to visit it. The third one being Threads, slash Instagram, I guess, but mostly Threads. It's my favorite social media location at this point. Not that that's saying too much, with how much I kind of can't stand Twitter, and I think that Blue Sky is just boring. The big thing with Threads is that it's gotten a lot of adoption by big brands. So I can't remember if they're doing ads yet or not. They will eventually. But one of the big problems with Blue Sky is that there's almost zero buy-in from brands. Probably because it's still on an invite system, and they probably can't get all of their brand names in there. So it's either probably an all or nothing thing. But Threads has big take up by big brands, all the gaming brands. Most of the gaming websites that I tend to follow or interact with are on there, and same with the people. So it still does have the big issue of, I believe, still not being available in Europe. That's obviously going to be a problem for them in the long run. They need to figure that out with the privacy commissions or whatever over there. But Threads is definitely the one that I'll probably focus on second most to Twitter, even though from a content perspective and posting things, I think that they're all kind of pointless, if I have to be totally honest. So let's talk about content. So what am I going to be covering as we kind of move forward? I obviously plan to continue covering Mass Effect and The Division. The thing is that this year, I think we've, each in their own way, we've had reasons to believe that both of those games and their upcoming games, the next Mass Effect, I won't dare call it Mass Effect 4 after, actually I will, but get over it. No one cares. It's not going to be called that anyways. It's many years off, probably for various reasons. And there's good reason to believe that The Division 3 isn't even in pre-production yet. So you're talking about at least, 5 or 6 years probably until that game comes out. And so while I plan to continue covering both of those games, whenever we get something to talk about, I'm going to have to cover other stuff too, because I need something to talk about on here. I'm not really completely willing to go all in on covering stuff like I don't really care about, but I know we'll get clicks, similar to what I said about Twitch. But there's a lot of things I am excited about. So, for Mass Effect, it may be until N7 Day 2024, almost a year from now, before we get big info about that. Now, there's probably going to be leaks and rumors, and maybe they'll release some info between now and then that I'll definitely cover. But, we'll see. The games I'm excited for next year already are Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and Star Wars Outlaws. Maybe The Division Heartland, we have to kind of see what's going on with that, as well as a handful of other games that I'm just not thinking of. But those are definitely the ones I'm really excited about, that I plan on covering pretty extensively, as well as covering things that come up, like whatever Summer Game Fest is going to look like. Next year's the Game Awards, new releases that come out that I didn't see coming that I'm excited about, talking about moves that Sony and PlayStation, as well as Microsoft and Xbox are going to make next year, whether we have like Pro systems coming out and things like that. There's a lot to talk about. It just may not, I'm trying to figure out a way to stick with trying to continue getting into the Mass Effect community, to try to reestablish myself a little bit in the Division community, but also just kind of trying to be true to myself and covering things I actually care about. As for the ways that you can support and help me out, to just be really clear, the money I make off of this always gets reinvested right back into the content I'm making. My upgraded PC, my screens, my software I buy, the cameras and all of that, all the stuff here in the background, the giveaways I've done and all of those things. I lose money for sure because it's a hobby. It's not a job, right? But anything you guys can contribute as much as you think it's worth it, I do appreciate. I try to give options that give incentives and things like that. But at the same time, it seems like most of the people who do support do it just because they want to and not because they're really looking for anything in return. So the first option being Patreon, it's shrunk a little bit. It was never very big in the first place. I've always hoped to try to get like 10 or 15 patrons. We've never quite gotten there before. But I do appreciate anyone who wants to use that platform. I have removed posting no ads episodes of the podcast on there, mostly because when I looked at the metrics, literally no one listens to them. It seems like everyone uses a podcast platform or uses YouTube. So I'm going to stop doing that. I will still post any new podcast content onto Patreon. And if I happen to have a big video project or interview that I can post early for people who are members, I absolutely will. But that just isn't, because it's not being utilized. I'm not going to keep using that extra 4 or 5 minutes of my time, which may not seem like a lot, but it does add up, to always post everything early on Patreon because no one utilizes it. But it's a big platform. People trust it. If you want to support me on there, I have $1, $5, and $10 tiers on there. I did start up a Ko-Fi. That is a similar thing to Patreon. They actually take a smaller cut. They only take 5% of the money that gets sent, as opposed to Patreon's 8%. And I also think that Ko-Fi's whole deal is just more simple. It doesn't allow me to post things early, or the big thing with Patreon is you can post content directly to their servers, where with like Ko-Fi, I have to post it to YouTube and then link it to Ko-Fi, which is fine because I'm kind of getting away from that early stuff anyways. But Ko-Fi is a great option if you want to do that. Maybe you don't like Patreon. Maybe you don't want to mess with YouTube or Twitch or Streamlabs donations and all that stuff. Ko-Fi seems like a pretty good option, and I now have links for that in all of the relevant places. And that is a $5 a month thing if you want. It can be a one-time thing. You can pick your own monthly amount. I don't have any tiers or anything on there. It's just basically whatever you want to do, feel free to do it. I am going to try to push more for YouTube memberships this year, as well as merch on there, and even Twitch subscriptions and bits and things like that. But the YouTube memberships especially, because again, if you don't like Twitch, then maybe YouTube's a good option. I am able to give some incentives directly to YouTube members, like posting videos early for them to see. As well as, if enough people join, I can start doing content that only goes to members, which is something I'm willing to do, which I could also post that to Patreons and stuff like that. So if you're interested in supporting, on one of those ways, that gives you, like your little membership icon and some emotes to use and things like that, you can get that from both YouTube membership and from being a Twitch subscriber. And then finally, I always have merch available on my Streamlabs store. I would argue that that's probably the best place to buy merch. If you want a coffee mug or a t-shirt or something like that, I make the prices as low as possible. I believe on a mug or something, I make like $1.50. So that's why those prices are, comparatively to other creators, probably really low, because I think it's actually more valuable to have someone have a Bond Diesel or a bonfire or whatever mug is sitting on their shelf or desk than it is to get $5 from that person. I just think it's kind of cool to have that kind of camaraderie, I guess, is how I look at it. So again, in all the links where you find my stuff, you should see a merch link which takes you to that Streamlabs store, and you're welcome to check that out and buy some stuff there if you want. And then kind of wrapping things up here, my 2024 plans and goals. My main goal, I think, for 2024 is to boost my podcast performance via podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I want to get better at doing my SEO or my search ability, I guess, branding, advertising, and show structure. You'll actually find that this week's The Bonfire has a new intro and outro song. It's a lo-fi version of a Willy Wonka song, Pure Imagination, that is rights free forever, and it's really cool. I like the way it sounds, and we can finally get rid of that awful fire crackling sound I've been using ever since the rebrand. So I do, my main thing is to boost the podcast this year, to get to that 500, 750, 1,000 listener mark every week is what I would really like to do for the Bonfire and even the Mass Effect Hypecast whenever I make those episodes, to try to bring in that community and continue growing with that. I do want to stream more often, and I want to make sure I keep up my YouTube post. I think I've been doing pretty good with that, staying consistent with getting new videos up, putting the podcast up, making shorts, making community posts and things like that. So, please, keep an eye out for all of that stuff. I do want to bring more guests onto content, and I would really like to be a guest on other people's content more often. And that would just be really cool. For branding and stuff, I'm probably not going to change stuff much. If you go to my YouTube community tab, I actually have a vote up right now for what logo I'm going to use for the next year. It's iterations of my current logo, or if you've ever seen my old Red Eyes Bond, logo, that's on there as well. So let me know what you think I should use for my logo for the next year. And getting almost 30 minutes into this thing, I will wrap it up, I promise. I just really want to show a lot of appreciation to anyone, especially who's still listening to this video. All of this growth and all of these opportunities I've gotten from doing this content, and the people I've gotten to speak to and things like that. I just really appreciate it all a lot. I wouldn't be able to do it without your time, your attention, and your support. So whether that support is just consuming my content, which is perfect, or if you choose to take an extra step, that's really great as well. I will say my next goal is to get an actual camera to record at least my YouTube videos in. I'd probably still stream with a webcam, but my goal by the end of 2024 is to get a legit camera set up, mostly for the YouTube videos, because I'm kind of sick of having this picture. Maybe it seems fine to you. I don't like it. So that would be my next big project. If you want to support that, I talked about all the ways you can do that. I am just really excited for 2024 to see what comes, to see what succeeds, to see what fails, and to hopefully meet my goals once again, which I will only be able to do with your help and your support. So thank you so much for listening. I can't wait until you can see the next thing I put out. Oh, yeah. And until next time.